Balancing family, faith, and personal growth. What if I told you that the greatest threat to your happiness is not failure, not fear, not even time, but imbalance? Think about it. We can have success without peace, wealth without love, growth without grounding. And when one piece is missing, the entire puzzle falls apart. I once heard someone say, you can run fast in the wrong direction and still end up nowhere. Isn't that true? We push hard at work. We chase goals. We try to grow. But somewhere along the way, family slips through the cracks. Faith becomes an afterthought. And suddenly, we look in the mirror and wonder, who am I becoming? Balance is the foundation of true happiness. Imbalance creates emptiness. Family gives unconditional love and grounding. Don't give them only your leftovers. Faith is the anchor that makes even struggles meaningful. Personal growth is not selfish, it's the fuel for giving and leading. The three pillars, family, faith, and growth, are doors that must all stay open. True success is not just climbing higher, but living whole, grounded, and fulfilled. Balance is the foundation of true happiness. Imbalance creates emptiness. And if you've ever felt like you were winning in one area of life while quietly losing in another, you know exactly what that means. Imagine for a moment a person who seems to have it all. Their career is on fire, their bank account is growing, their social media highlights are flawless. From the outside, everyone envies them. But late at night, when the phone stops buzzing and the noise dies down, they sit in silence and realize something is missing. The applause doesn't echo forever, and the success feels strangely hollow. Why? Because balance was traded for achievement. And achievement without balance is a counterfeit kind of success. I remember hearing a father say, I worked all my life to give my children everything I never had, and somehow I gave them everything except myself. That line stuck with me like a weight. It's a haunting reminder that imbalance doesn't announce itself loudly. It creeps in quietly. You don't wake up one morning and decide, today I'll neglect my family. Today I'll forget my health. Today I'll push my faith aside. No, imbalance is far more subtle. It starts with small compromises. You stay an extra hour at work. You skip that one dinner at home. You put off reflection or prayer until tomorrow. And then tomorrow becomes a habit. Before long, the scales tilt and you realize you've been sprinting in one direction while leaving entire parts of your life behind. Think of life as a chair with three legs. One leg is family, one leg is faith, one leg is personal growth. If one leg is missing, you can balance for a while, but not forever. Eventually, you fall. And the fall isn't just yours. It impacts everyone who depends on you. That's the dangerous thing about imbalance. It's never just personal, it's relational. When you neglect family, it's your children, spouse, or loved ones who feel the absence. When you neglect faith, it's your peace and integrity that suffer. When you neglect growth, it's your future self that pays the price. Balance, then, isn't a luxury, it's survival. I once met a woman who ran her own business, managed a household, and somehow still found time to mentor young people in her community. When I asked her how she managed to keep so many pieces of her life together, she said something I'll never forget. I stopped chasing balance as perfection. Instead, I chose balance as intention. That sentence is gold. Balance doesn't mean everything is perfectly, even at every moment. It means you are intentional about what matters most, and you refuse to let one thing starve while another thing thrives. It's not about equal slices of time. It's about equal slices of heart. Think about a scale in a marketplace, the kind where you weigh fruit. One side dips lower when more weight is added. If you pour all your effort into your career, that side of the scale will sink while the other sides rise up, neglected. But if you add even a little weight of time, presence, and care to family, to faith, to yourself, the balance steadies. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be intentional. Let me ask you, have you ever seen someone reach the top of their game only to look exhausted, bitter, or alone? Have you ever looked at someone and thought, If that's success, I'm not sure I want it. That's imbalance in plain sight, and the world is full of it. We've been conditioned to applaud the visible, the promotion, the recognition, the trophies, while ignoring the invisible, the quiet dinners, the inner peace, the slow growth of character. But the invisible is what makes the visible worthwhile. Balance isn't glamorous, and that's why it's often overlooked. It looks like choosing to put your phone down during dinner. It looks like saying no to a project so you can say yes to a family weekend. It looks like carving out 10 minutes in the morning to breathe, reflect, pray, or plan. Small choices. Small weights placed carefully on the scale. And here's the secret: those small choices, multiplied over time, protect you from the emptiness of imbalance. One of my mentors once told me, the things that matter most rarely scream for your attention. They whisper. And if you don't lean in, you'll miss them. Isn't that true? Your children won't scream, "Notice me," every time. They'll simply grow up. Your faith won't always shout. It will wait quietly. Your own growth won't demand it. It will just stall. And if you're too busy listening to the loud noise of ambition, you'll miss the whispers that hold your real happiness. So balance isn't about slowing down. It's about realigning. It's about pausing long enough to ask, what's tipping too far? What's being ignored? And when you answer honestly, you begin to recalibrate. Because in the end, imbalance creates emptiness. But balance creates wholeness. Not perfection, not flawless juggling, but wholeness. And wholeness is what gives your life depth, meaning, and the kind of success you can actually live with. Faith is the anchor that makes even struggles meaningful. Without it, life can feel like a boat drifting in open waters, tossed by every wave of uncertainty, with no compass to guide the way. But with faith, whether you call it belief, trust, or a deeper sense of purpose, you suddenly have something steady to hold on to. And the truth is, everyone faces storms. Everyone gets knocked down. The difference between those who break and those who rise often comes down to this quiet, invisible strength we call faith. I remember meeting a man who had lost his job, his home, and nearly his sense of dignity, all in the span of 1 year. He told me, the only thing that kept me standing was the thought that this season wasn't the end of my story. That sentence is faith in action. He had no proof things would get better, no evidence that tomorrow would look brighter. But he believed, and that belief gave him enough courage to wake up one more day, to try one more time, to hold on when it would have been easier to let go. Isn't that the essence of faith? To believe when there's nothing visible to cling to trust that the unseen will carry you when the seen fails. Faith doesn't always arrive with fanfare. It's rarely loud or dramatic. More often, it's like a small candle in a dark room. The candle doesn't eliminate all the darkness, but it gives just enough light for you to take the next step. And step by step, that's how people survive the hardest seasons of life. Without faith, darkness feels endless. With faith, darkness becomes temporary. I once heard a mother describe how she sat by her child's hospital bed for weeks, listening to the beeping machines, the sterile silence of the room, the uncertainty of whether her child would recover. She said she whispered prayers not because she thought they would magically change reality, but because they gave her the strength to stay present, to keep hope alive for her little one. I needed faith, she said, not to escape the storm, but to stand in it without drowning. That kind of faith is not about control, it's about surrender. It's about choosing to trust even when nothing makes sense. Here's something most people don't realize: if faith and fear often arrive together. Fear screams, what if it doesn't work out? Faith whispers, but what if it does? Fear says, you're not enough. Faith says, you're not alone. The battle between them happens in the silence of our thoughts. And the side you feed becomes the side that wins. That's why faith must be nurtured daily, like a muscle that grows only when used. Think about a seed planted in the ground. For weeks, maybe months. There's nothing to see. You water it, you wait, but the soil looks barren. Yet underground, life is stirring. Roots are stretching. Growth is happening invisibly. That's faith. It's trusting that what you cannot see is still working for you. And when the breakthrough comes, you realize it was never sudden. It was always in progress, just hidden. People sometimes think faith means ignoring reality, but it's the opposite. Faith acknowledges reality, the bills, the diagnosis, the rejection, and then chooses to believe that reality doesn't have the final word. A friend once told me, faith doesn't erase the valley. It gives you the courage to walk through it. That image has stayed with me, because every valley feels endless until you reach the other side, and the only way through is to keep walking, one step, one breath, one prayer at a time. In moments of success, faith keeps you humble. It reminds you that the spotlight doesn't define you, that there's something greater than applause, greater than achievement. In moments of failure, faith keeps you resilient. It tells you that your mistakes are not your identity, that the setback is only a setup for growth. Faith, in every season, gives meaning to the highs and the lows. Without it, you might win but feel empty. With it, you might struggle but still feel full. And perhaps the most beautiful thing about faith is that it doesn't require perfection. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need a flawless record of belief. Sometimes faith is just showing up when you want to hide. Sometimes it's whispering a shaky, "I still believe," even when your heart is breaking. Sometimes it's borrowing the faith of others until yours grows back. So when storms come, and they will, you have two choices. Drift aimlessly, at the mercy of the waves, or drop anchor in something deeper, something stronger than yourself. That anchor won't always stop the storm, but it will keep you steady until it passes. And that's why faith matters. It doesn't make life easier, but it makes life possible. It gives weight to your struggles, meaning to your pain, and light to your darkest nights. Personal growth is not selfish, it's fuel. Too often we're told that pouring into ourselves is indulgent, even selfish, as if taking time to learn, rest, or dream somehow steals from others. But the truth is the opposite. Neglecting your growth doesn't make you more available to those around you. It quietly drains you until you're running on fumes. Have you ever tried to give your best when you were exhausted, uninspired, or burned out? It doesn't work. You can fake it for a while, but eventually the cracks show. Growth is what keeps you alive inside. It's what allows you to keep giving without going empty. I once heard a story of a man who worked tirelessly for his family. Every day he woke up before sunrise, came home long after dark, and told himself it was worth it because he was providing. But over the years, something began to change. He became bitter, short-tempered, impatient. His children didn't want to be around him. His wife felt the distance. He had given everything except himself, and in the process he lost his joy. When he was asked what he did for himself, what books he read, what hobbies he enjoyed, how he grew his mind or spirit, he went silent. He couldn't remember the last time he did anything that made him feel alive. That silence was the cost of neglecting growth. Think of growth like oxygen on an airplane. Before takeoff, flight attendants always say, "Put on your own mask before helping others." Why? Because if you can't breathe, you can't save anyone else. Growth works the same way. You cannot pour encouragement, wisdom, or love into others if you are starving inside. Yet so many of us treat personal growth as optional, something we'll get to after the deadlines, after the chores, after the family obligations. And by the time we get to it, we're too tired to even try. But growth doesn't have to be huge or dramatic. It's not always about climbing mountains or reinventing yourself overnight. Sometimes growth is hidden in the smallest of habits. It's choosing to read 10 pages of a book instead of scrolling endlessly on your phone. It's waking up 20 minutes earlier to reflect or journal. It's signing up for that class you've been curious about but too nervous to try. Growth is less about giant leaps and more about consistent steps. One of my mentors once told me, if you're not growing, you're shrinking. At first I thought that was extreme, but the more I watched life, the more I realized it was true. Growth doesn't stand still. If you're not actively feeding your mind and spirit, the world's noise and negativity start to erode you. It's like a garden. If you don't tend it, weeds take over. You don't have to plant weeds. They grow automatically. But flowers and fruit, they require intention. Personal growth is the same. You must choose it, water it, protect it. Otherwise, life will fill the space with weeds. Consider the difference between two leaders. One spends time learning, reflecting, exercising, surrounding themselves with mentors. The other never invests in their growth, too busy keeping up with everyone else's needs. Both may look the same from a distance, but when challenges hit, the difference is clear. The first leads with clarity and strength. The second crumbles under pressure. Why? Because the first had reserves. They had been filling themselves up, preparing, growing. The second had nothing left to draw from. Growth is what builds resilience before the storm arrives. Sometimes people resist growth because it forces them to confront their own comfort zones. It's easier to stay the same, to say, this is just who I am, than to stretch into something new. But growth is never comfortable. It asks you to step into the unfamiliar, to risk failure, to admit you don't know it all. Yet that discomfort is the birthplace of transformation. No one ever discovers their true strength in the safety of the familiar. It's only when you step out that you discover what you're truly capable of. And here's the part that feels almost like a secret. When you grow, everyone around you benefits. Your family benefits because you bring more patience, more energy, more wisdom to the table. Your work benefits because you're sharper, more creative, more resilient. Your faith deepens because you see new layers of meaning and possibility. Growth is not selfish because its fruit is never just yours. It overflows. A better you creates a better world for those around you. So imagine yourself as a well. If you draw water every day without ever replenishing, eventually the well runs dry. People come to you thirsty, but you have nothing left to give. But if you make time to refill, to deepen, to expand, then the well overflows. People come thirsty, and you can pour out generously without fear of running empty. That's what growth does. It turns scarcity into abundance, exhaustion into energy, survival into thriving. Personal growth is not about becoming someone else. It's about uncovering more of who you already are. It's about peeling back the layers of fear, doubt, and routine to find the potential waiting underneath. And when you commit to it, not someday, not when it's convenient, but now, you discover that growth is not selfish at all. It is the most generous thing you can do. Because the more you grow, the more you have to give. Personal growth is not selfish, it's fuel. It's the energy that allows you to keep showing up, not just for yourself, but for the people who count on you. Yet so many of us treat it like an afterthought, something we'll get around to once everything else is handled. The irony is that by postponing it, by neglecting it, we quietly drain our own strength until we're running on fumes. Have you ever tried to be patient with your children when you're mentally exhausted? Tried to support a partner when your own heart is empty? Tried to lead at work when you feel uninspired? You can fake it for a while, but the cracks eventually show. Growth isn't selfish because when you expand, when you learn, when you take care of your inner life, everyone around you feels the difference. I once met a teacher who gave everything to her students. She stayed late, bought supplies out of her own pocket, mentored kids who didn't have support at home. Her heart was huge, but she was exhausted. When I asked what she did for herself, what hobbies she enjoyed, what books she read, how she fueled her spirit, she just laughed and said, "Who has time for that?" Over the years, she became bitter, short-tempered, worn down. The same students she loved so deeply began to feel her frustration. She had been pouring endlessly, but she never refilled her own cup. That's what happens when you neglect growth. You slowly lose the very energy that once made you effective. Think about the oxygen mask on an airplane. The flight attendant always says, "Put your own mask on first before helping others." At first that sounds selfish, even wrong. Why would you help yourself before your child, your spouse, your loved one? But then you realize it's the only way you can help. If you pass out, you're no use to anyone. Growth works the same way. If you don't feed your mind, stretch your skills, or nurture your soul, you eventually collapse. You may still be there physically, but emotionally and mentally you're gone. Growth doesn't have to be dramatic. It's not always about getting a new degree or building a business from scratch. Sometimes it's about tiny decisions that build over time. Reading a chapter instead of scrolling endlessly on your phone. Taking a walk to clear your head instead of numbing yourself with noise. Asking yourself hard questions about what you want in 5 years instead of staying stuck in routines that don't serve you. These small acts don't look impressive on the surface, but they compound. Day by day, they create a stronger, wiser, more centered version of you. One of my mentors once said, "If you're not growing, you're shrinking." At first I thought that was an exaggeration, but the more I paid attention, the more it rang true. Growth doesn't stand still, life keeps moving, and if you're not actively expanding, learning, and stretching, the world's pressure starts to wear you down. It's like a garden. If you don't tend it, weeds show up automatically. You don't have to plant weeds, they just come. But fruit, flowers, beauty, those require intention. Growth is your garden. If you don't plant seeds of learning, reflection, and challenge, the weeds of stress, negativity, and stagnation take over. I think of two kinds of people I've seen in leadership. One is constantly reading, learning, surrounding themselves with people who stretch them. The other never takes time for growth, always too busy putting out fires. Both might look effective on the surface, but when challenges hit, the difference becomes obvious. The one who grew consistently has reserves of wisdom and resilience. The other, running on empty, crumbles under pressure. That's the cost of ignoring growth. You find out you're unprepared when it matters most. Growth isn't comfortable. It forces you to face fears, to leave your comfort zone, to admit that who you are today isn't yet who you're meant to be. That's why so many avoid it. But every breakthrough hides behind discomfort. The first time you speak in public, you shake. The first time you invest in yourself, you doubt. The first time you try something new, you stumble. Yet it's in that discomfort that transformation is born. No one discovers their strength by staying where it's safe. And here's the part that most people miss: when you grow, you're not the only one who benefits. Your family gets a stronger, wiser version of you. Your work gets a more creative, resilient leader. Your faith deepens because you have more space to reflect and expand. Growth spills over. A fuller you creates fullness for others. It's never selfish. It's the most generous thing you can do. Picture yourself as a well in the middle of a village. People come every day to draw water. Your children, your friends, your colleagues. If you never replenish, if you never dig deeper, eventually the well runs dry. The people who depend on you find nothing. But if you keep filling, keep deepening, keep investing in yourself, the well overflows. You can give and give without fear of running empty. That is what growth does. It turns scarcity into abundance, exhaustion into energy, survival into thriving. And growth is not about becoming someone else. It's about uncovering more of who you already are. It's peeling back layers of fear, routine, and doubt to reveal the strength, creativity, and potential waiting inside. Every time you choose growth, you're saying yes to that deeper version of yourself. And when you do, not only do you rise, you lift everyone around you with you. Personal growth is not selfish, it's fuel. Imagine trying to drive a car across the country without ever stopping for gas. At first, it runs smoothly, the engine humming, the miles flying by. But no matter how strong the vehicle is, no matter how well it was built, without fuel it will eventually stall in the middle of nowhere. That's exactly what happens when we forget to grow. We keep going, pouring into others, carrying responsibilities, fulfilling duties, but sooner or later, the tank runs dry. The people around us may still see us moving, but inside we feel stuck, drained, and dangerously close to breaking down. Growth is not indulgence. It is the fuel that keeps us alive, keeps us vibrant, keeps us able to give more than we ever imagined. I once spoke to a man who had worked tirelessly to build a business from nothing. He sacrificed sleep, skipped vacations, missed family dinners, all in the name of providing. He achieved financial success, but when I asked him what books he had read lately, what skills he had been sharpening, or what dreams he was still chasing for himself, he couldn't answer. He laughed nervously and said, "I've been too busy surviving to think about growing." And there it was, the trap so many fall into. We confuse business with progress. We confuse survival with success. But without growth, all the accomplishments in the world feel shallow, because deep down, we know we're not evolving. Think of growth as watering a plant. Neglect it and it may stay alive for a while, but eventually the leaves wilt, the color fades and the roots weaken. Give it water, sunlight, care, and it thrives, stretching toward the sky, blooming in ways you never expected. Personal growth is that sunlight for the soul. It doesn't just keep you alive, it helps you flourish. And flourishing is what allows you to bless others. You can't shade others if your own branches have withered. You can't inspire others if you've stopped inspiring yourself. One of my favorite reminders came from a young mother I once met. She told me, "I used to feel guilty for taking time to read, to work out, to pursue my passions. But then I realized that when I grow, I become a better mother. My kids don't just get a caretaker, they get a woman who's alive, learning, and excited about life." That energy flows into them. Her words stayed with me because they revealed the truth so many forget. Personal growth overflows. When you invest in yourself, everyone around you reaps the benefit. It's not selfish, it's contagious. But growth isn't easy. It pushes you into uncomfortable spaces, and comfort is where most people settle. It's easier to stay in the routine, to live on autopilot, to repeat yesterday because it feels safe. Growth disrupts that. Growth says, what if you tried something new? What if you dared to be more than you've been? It's risky. It's scary. But it's the only way transformation happens. I remember the first time I stepped on stage to speak. My hands shook, my voice wavered, and I wanted to run. But after it was done, I realized something had shifted inside me. I had stretched, I had grown. And from that moment forward, I could never go back to who I was before. That's the gift of growth. It changes you in ways you cannot undo. There's a saying, if you're not growing, you're shrinking. At first, it feels dramatic, but think about it. Life is never still. The world moves forward, and if you aren't expanding your mind, deepening your faith, strengthening your skills, you're falling behind, not because you're lazy, but because stagnation isn't neutral. It slowly pulls you backwards. Like a garden left untended, weeds creep in. You don't have to plant them, they grow on their own. But beauty, fruit, and flowers, they take intention. Growth requires attention. If you want to bear fruit for yourself and others, you must plant and water daily. Picture yourself as a well. People come to you for advice, for encouragement, for love. They draw water every day. But what happens if you never refill? Eventually the well runs dry, and those who depended on you leave empty-handed. Growth is the act of deepening the well, refilling it with fresh water, ensuring that when people come to you, you have abundance to share. Without growth, you become hollow. With growth, you overflow. And perhaps the greatest secret is this: personal growth is not about becoming someone else. It's not about fixing yourself because you're broken. It's about uncovering more of who you already are, peeling back the layers of fear, doubt, and limitation to reveal the potential that's been waiting all along. Every time you learn something new, every time you challenge yourself, every time you take a step into discomfort, you discover another piece of yourself that was always there. Growth doesn't create you, it reveals you. And the more you reveal, the more light you bring, not just to your own path, but to everyone walking beside you. Personal growth is not selfish, it's the fuel for giving and leading. Somewhere along the way, we were taught that focusing on ourselves was indulgent, that the noble path was to always put others first and silence our own needs. But here's the hidden truth. When you stop growing, you stop giving at your best. When you stop pouring into yourself, what you offer others becomes weaker, thinner, and less alive. Growth is not about abandoning responsibility. It's about sharpening yourself so you can carry responsibility with strength. It's the fire that keeps the house warm, and without it, everyone inside feels the cold. I once met a man who had spent his entire life working for his family. Every paycheck went to the bills, every hour went to labor, and every ounce of energy was spent making sure his loved ones never lacked. On paper, he was the definition of selfless. But when his children grew up, they described him as absent, disconnected, tired, and angry. He had given everything except his joy, his presence, and his growth. The truth is, you cannot love fully from depletion. You cannot lead from emptiness. And that is why growth matters. Not because it makes you more important, but because it makes you more available in the ways that count. Think of a candle. A single flame can light up a room, and it can even light other candles without losing its glow. But if that flame goes out, everything around it sinks back into darkness. That's what happens when we neglect our own growth. We still try to give, but we're giving from a place of burnout, from a place of resentment, from a place of exhaustion. And people can feel it. Our family feels it. Our coworkers feel it. Our communities feel it. True leadership doesn't come from running yourself into the ground. It comes from staying lit, from keeping the fire alive inside you. Growth shows up in the smallest decisions that seem invisible at the time. A parent who reads and learns becomes a source of wisdom for their children. A leader who invests in emotional intelligence becomes the calm in the middle of chaos. A friend who takes care of their own mental health becomes the one others trust to lean on. These are not random gifts. They are the fruit of growth. They are the byproduct of someone who realized that taking care of themselves was not selfish, but essential. I remember a young woman who told me, I used to feel guilty for spending time on myself. Going to the gym, reading, journaling. It all felt like I was stealing time from my family. But then I noticed something. On the days I grew, even a little, I came home more patient, more present, more loving. My growth made me a better wife, a better mother, a better friend. That realization shifted her entire life. She no longer saw growth as time taken away. She saw it as time multiplied. Because every hour invested in her own soul returned tenfold in how she showed up for others. And that's the real magic. Growth is multiplication. When you sharpen yourself, when you invest in learning, when you take care of your inner and outer life, the impact ripples outward. People around you get the best version of you. They get your wisdom, your peace, your creativity, your energy. Growth is like filling a reservoir. You don't just drink from it yourself. You become the well others can draw from. But if you never refill, if you never expand, the reservoir dries, and those who depend on you leave empty-handed. There's a saying, you cannot pour from an empty cup. But what most people forget is that you cannot lead from one either. People don't follow because you're busy. They follow because you're whole. They don't look to you because you're perfect. They look because you've done the inner work, because you have the clarity and strength they crave. That kind of leadership doesn't come from constant sacrifice. It comes from intentional growth. Imagine a tree planted in a field. If it grows tall, strong, and healthy, it gives shade to those who rest under it, fruit to those who are hungry, and beauty to those who pass by. But if the tree is stunted, if it never grows, its branches stay bare, its roots stay shallow, and no one finds comfort under it. You are that tree. Your growth determines not just what you become, but what you can give. Personal growth then is not about selfish ambition. It's about responsibility. It's about saying, I will become more so I can give more. It's about understanding that when you grow, your family thrives. When you grow, your team strengthens. When you grow, your community rises. Growth is not stealing from others. It's preparing to serve them better. And when you finally embrace that truth, you realize that personal growth is not the opposite of giving and leading. It is the very foundation of it. The three pillars of life, family, faith, and growth, are like doors that must all remain open if we want to step into a life of fulfillment. Imagine walking down a long hallway with three magnificent doors. Each one is carved with intricate detail. Each one promises something vital. The first holds the warmth of family, the second the steadiness of faith, and the third the fire of growth. Now picture yourself walking past and only opening one. You step inside, and at first it feels good. There's light, there's comfort, there's satisfaction. But soon you begin to notice something missing. The air feels incomplete, the joy doesn't last, the peace doesn't quite settle. That's what happens when we live with one or two doors closed. You can survive that way, but you cannot thrive. I once knew a man who poured everything into personal growth and his career. He devoured books, traveled, worked endless hours to sharpen his craft. He succeeded in ways most people only dream of. But his family hardly knew him anymore. His faith had been shelved for someday. And though his resume was full, his heart was empty. He opened only one door, the door of growth, and ignored the others. From the outside, he looked unstoppable. On the inside, he felt incomplete. That is the risk of closing even a single door. On the other hand, I once met a family who seemed incredibly close-knit. They ate meals together, celebrated holidays, and always showed up for each other. But when life's storms hit, an illness, financial struggles, unexpected loss, they found themselves unraveling. They loved each other, but without faith to anchor them or personal growth to strengthen them individually, their love wasn't enough to carry the weight. They had opened the door of family, but left the others shut. And their house, though built with warmth, could not withstand the storm. Faith, family, and growth are not meant to compete. They are meant to complement each other, like three legs of a stool. Remove one, and the stool can wobble for a while, but sooner or later it topples. Keep all three, and you can sit firmly no matter how much weight is placed on it. It's not about perfection or giving equal time every day. It's about refusing to neglect any of them completely. Because when one is locked away, the others cannot fully do their job. A friend once told me, balance isn't about having it all. It's about keeping the most important doors unlocked. That line hit me hard because it spoke to the pressure many of us feel. We think balance means splitting time evenly, giving 33% to each part. But life doesn't work that way. Some seasons demand more from family. Some seasons stretch your faith. Some seasons push you to grow intensely. And that's okay, as long as none of the doors are sealed shut. Because when one stays closed too long, the air in your life becomes stale, and the joy starts to fade. Think about music. A symphony doesn't depend on just one instrument. The strings, the percussion, the brass, the woodwinds, all play their part. Imagine a symphony with only violins, beautiful at first, but soon it becomes flat, or only drums, powerful, but overwhelming. Life is the same. Family brings melody, faith provides harmony, growth delivers rhythm. Alone, each one has beauty. Together, they create a masterpiece. And here's the secret most people miss: opening all three doors doesn't take away from your life, it multiplies it. When you invest in family, your faith grows deeper because you experience love in action. When you nurture your faith, your growth has meaning because it's anchored in something bigger than ambition. When you grow personally, You bring new strength and wisdom back to your family and your faith. Each door feeds the other, like rivers flowing into the same ocean. I once heard someone say, true wealth is having people you love, something you believe in, and a reason to keep becoming more. That is what these three doors represent. Family gives you people. Faith gives you belief. Growth gives you purpose. Close any one of them, and wealth turns into poverty of the soul. Keep them all open, and even in the hardest seasons, you walk with abundance. So the question is not which door you'll choose, but whether you'll have the courage to open them all. Because it takes courage, it's easy to pour into work and neglect family. It's easy to cling to family and avoid the discomfort of growth. It's easy to practice faith on Sundays but leave it outside when life gets tough. But courage means refusing to choose one at the expense of the others. Courage means walking through every door, even when it feels like too much, because you know the reward is wholeness. Life's hallway is long, and each door has something waiting for you. Behind one is love. Behind another is strength. Behind the last is expansion. When you choose them all, you create a house where you can live fully, give freely, and stand unshaken. And isn't that the life we're all chasing? Not just success, not just survival, but the fullness that comes from opening every door and refusing to settle for anything less. True success is not just climbing higher, it is living whole, grounded, and fulfilled. The world often tells us that success is measured by titles, possessions, or applause, but deep down, we all know those things alone don't satisfy. Think about it. How many times have you read about someone who reached the top of their career, earned millions, or became famous, only to fall apart behind closed doors? They climbed the mountain everyone was pointing to, only to discover the view at the top was lonelier than they expected. Success without wholeness is like standing on a peak with nothing but emptiness in your chest. It looks impressive, but it feels hollow. I once met a man who built a thriving company. His face was in magazines, his name carried weight, and everyone envied his lifestyle. But when I sat with him privately, he confessed, I spent 20 years climbing the ladder, and now I realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. That statement hit me hard. He had chased the climb, the higher titles, the bigger houses, the louder recognition. Yet he admitted he barely knew his children. His faith had grown distant, and he had neglected his health so badly that stress had become his normal. He reached the summit, but he had lost the foundation. That is the tragedy of chasing success without wholeness. You get the height, but not the grounding. Now contrast that with a woman I know who never made headlines, never sat in corner offices, and never lived in a mansion. She worked steadily, raised her family with intention, kept her faith strong, and poured time into her personal growth. She didn't climb the mountain the world glorified, but when you walked into her home, you felt peace. Her children adored her, her friends respected her, and she carried herself with quiet confidence. She was grounded, she was whole. And isn't that what we really want? Not just to look successful, but to feel alive and fulfilled in every part of who we are. The danger comes when we confuse movement with meaning. Climbing higher is about motion, always pushing for more, but wholeness is about direction. Imagine running up a staircase in the dark. You're sweating, you're moving, you're going higher, but you have no idea where it leads. That's what success feels like when it's only about climbing. Now imagine standing on solid ground, the sun shining, your feet steady, your heart at peace. That's wholeness, that's fulfillment. One burns you out, the other fills you up. I remember a quote from a mentor who said, "Success isn't what you build, it's what remains when everything else is stripped away." That stopped me in my tracks. Because it's true. If your money disappeared, if your job title vanished, if the applause went silent, what would be left? Would you still have your family? Would you still have your faith? Would you still have the person you became through growth? If the answer is yes, then you are already successful. because you have something the world cannot take from you. Too many people climb so fast that they forget to notice who they're becoming along the way. They chase numbers, accolades, and approval, only to wake up one day realizing they've lost their sense of self. Wholeness requires a slower, more intentional climb. It asks you to pause and check, am I growing deeper as I go higher? Am I building roots as well as branches? Because a tree that only grows tall without deep roots will eventually topple when the storm comes. The truth is, storms always come. Loss, failure, rejection, disappointment. They visit us all. When they hit, height won't protect you. Only grounding will. The big house won't hold you when grief comes. The applause won't comfort you when you're alone. But family, faith, and growth will. They are the roots that dig deep into the soil, keeping you steady when everything else shakes. That's why real success is not just climbing higher, but living whole. Because wholeness can withstand what height cannot. And here's the beauty of it. When you live whole, you still climb, you still achieve, you still rise. But your climb has meaning. You're not just chasing higher for the sake of it. You're climbing in a way that doesn't cost you the parts of life that matter most. Each step is rooted. Each achievement is grounded. Each victory adds to your wholeness instead of subtracting from it. That's when success feels rich, not empty. So maybe the real question we should ask ourselves is this: what kind of life will I be proud of when I reach the end? Will I celebrate the climb alone, or will I look around and see the faces of those who walked with me, the faith that carried me, the growth that shaped me? Because in the end, success isn't measured in how high you went, but in how whole you became while going. What if I told you the life you dream of, the peace, the joy, the fulfillment is not waiting on more money, more titles, or more applause, but on the choices you make right now, not tomorrow, not someday. Now, choose to open every door. Choose family, choose faith, choose growth. Because when you do, you don't just build a life, you build a legacy. You don't just survive, you thrive. You don't just climb, you stand grounded and unshaken. Remember this: success without wholeness is emptiness. But success with wholeness is abundance. And abundance is what you were made for. So don't wait, don't delay, don't settle. Open every door, step through boldly, live fully. Because at the end of it all, the world won't remember how high you climbed. It will remember how whole you lived. And that, my friends, is the kind of success worth everything.